My name is Martin Matter with the Witness to War Foundation. It's April 12th, 2024, and we are at the VFW in Falcon, Colorado. I'm sitting with Mr. Carl Spencer, S-P-E-N-C-E-R, who served in Desert Storm in the United States Navy. He served aboard multiple ships, including the USS Elliott DD-967. How are you doing today, Carl?
Real good.
Glad to hear it. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. My first question is, where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Lexington, Missouri.
And tell me about growing up. What were your parents like?
I had a normal childhood. Got up to 10 years old. My father moved us to Phoenix, Arizona in 1956. And we lived out there for 5 years until we moved there on my birthday, August. We was on the road at 10 years old, and we come back on my birthday when I was 15, back to Lexington, Missouri. And 1 year later, my father worked for Bendix. He was a machinist. Real quick on my father, he made chief in the Navy at 23 years old. That's the same as Custer making general at 23 years old in the Civil War. It's unheard of. He was a boy chief. But that was World War II.
World War II?
He was an aviation machinist mate.
Wow.
And he made chief in 1944. I made chief in 1984. When I turned 16 years old in Lexington, Missouri, getting ready to start my junior year, my father was killed in a car wreck on his way to work, Bendix. They're in Kansas City. Lexington's just 40 miles down the river from Kansas City, Missouri River. And shortly thereafter, my mother remarried another guy. She ran off to Oklahoma because you could get married without waiting 3 days for the blood test back then. Never knew where she was for a couple weeks. My grandma took care of us. I had 2 brothers and 1 sister. And so when she did come home, I didn't get along with my stepfather, so I got in a fight with him, and my mother had me put in jail. And I went into, but Gene Darnell was the sheriff of the county, and he knew my father real well and all that, and so he got the prosecuting attorney to help me get in the Navy. I had to wait till I was 17. I joined the Navy when I was 17, but I couldn't go back home. I was on my own after that.
And what year was that?
1962. And so I went in the Navy, and usually in Kansas City, when you join the Navy, they'll send you to San Diego. But they had spinal meningitis break out in boot camp, so they told me when I come up to leave from Lexington that I had to go to Great Lakes boot camp. And but I could go back home and wait a week or so, and they would let me know, and I could go on to San Diego. But I went on to Great Lakes. I had no home to go back to. I went to Great Lakes and ended up going to the East Coast. That's how I missed Vietnam. And that was 1964, right out of 5 days out of high school.
Where on the East Coast?
Pardon me?
Where on the East Coast? Jacksonville?
My first ship was the Wasp, aircraft carrier Wasp in Boston, Massachusetts, in South Boston. I never met Whitey Bulger, but he was there at the time. But I used to go, to the different, the Fargo building, different places there for sailors,
What was your job on the Wasp?
I was basically a deck ape at the time. I was just mess cooking, scrubbing decks, painting and stuff, bosun mate work. And they decommissioned, but what the actual mission of the ship was, they didn't have any more aircraft on them. They just had helos, and they went out and picked up the Gemini flights with the astronauts on board. They would pick the capsule up out of the water and helo it back to the deck, and then they'd have footprints on the deck for the astronauts to walk, but they didn't know what they were bringing back from outer space. It would infect the whole world, you know. So they kept them quarantined, took them to sick bay, and then put them in a stateroom, you know, for observation for a while. But we never really got to talk to them, you know. But it was exciting, you know, it was different, you know. And they decommissioned a year after I got on board, and then I went to another ship that was in the yards in Boston. And it was a Willis A. Lee, DL-4. It was a destroyer leader. And I served my last couple years on board there. Things got a little better because when I walked across the quarterdeck, the officer of the deck was the chief for our division. So they said, he asked me, Seaman Spencer, are you here for any division, or no, I'm up for grabs. Boom, take this lad to my division, and he's gonna be trained by me and be a ship fitter now, you know, ship's repair. So he taught me how to weld and all that good stuff. So you know.
So Vietnam was going on during this time?
Right, Vietnam was going full blast. And I volunteered. A ship was gonna be put back in commission, an aircraft carrier, the Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and taken back around and brought into Vietnam. And I volunteered to go, but the ship wouldn't let me go without a replacement. You know how that goes. They were short-handed to begin with, so I missed Vietnam, but I missed Agent Orange. I missed the whole thing, you know. I had some buddies. Yeah, I had some buddies die over there, you know, Marines from Lexington, you know, from Missouri, that I knew real well. Good kid. But, you know, this was a sad part of it, you know, but.
So how long did you stay on the Lee?
I was on there for a couple of years. I was in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, aboard ship going through refresher training. There's where East Coast ships would go down, and you would go out for the day, and you'd have inspectors on board, and then they'd go fire, 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 and then you sound general quarters, all hands man your battle stations, and we'd run down there. I was a first responder, you know, and so we'd dress all out in OBAs and so forth, and break out the hoses, put a static head on them, and then shut the valves off so we'd get the feel of taking them down 3 decks into the main spaces and stuff like that. And they would drill us and train us. And all ships in the Navy have to go through that once a year to get an operating license, you know, as an ocean-going ship. And you have to pass those drills, you know. I never failed a Navy drill. I never failed a Navy test my whole Navy career. I got a couple of marginal SATs, but I still passed, you know, because some of those drills you have to rely on a heck of a lot more people, and you got to keep them interested, or, you know, get the job done.
Well, I want to hop ahead a little bit and ask about what happened in Iran, what ship you were on, and what you remember about the Iran hostage crisis.
In '79, when
Yes,
they took our, It was basically, we were just off the coast, standing by to assist. And so it was just, since we were in the zone,
What ship were you on?
when that happened,
Yeah.
that was the Elliott.
Oh, so.
Yeah, that was the Elliott. That's Bruins class destroyer. That was, the first one built was 963, and they built 30 of them at Pascagoula, Mississippi. And they all had jet engines in them and would burn a lot of fuel. They would hold 508,000 gallons of JP5. You'd run on JP5 jet fuel. And
I imagine those were some pretty high speeds for
it
destroyers.
would go 60 knots. This thing was 563 feet long, 55 feet at the beam or midship. It goes 60 knots, which is a mile and an eighth. A knot's a mile and an eighth. So you look 60 times 1.125, you know, is how fast you were going. You're going a little over 60 miles an hour, and that's fast on a ship. We were doing a Tiger cruise one time out of San Diego where we had dependents on board, and it was broad daylight, and the captain of the ship, who made two-star admiral, he was a commander in rank, same as a lieutenant colonel when he was captain. But he went on, and by Desert Storm, he made two-star admiral, right? His name was Clary, Admiral Clary, and Steve Clary, and he was a great captain. I knew we'd go up there, and
So you were saying you were in the area when the crisis began?
right, yeah, we were in the Persian Gulf, so we came on down to the Straits of Hormuz right there, and stayed in there, you know, for any kind of assistance, you know. But I made like 8 Westpacks and went to the Persian Gulf 6 or 7 times when, you know,
Right.
doing those.
You were saying you made chief in 84?
1984, yeah.
Awesome. Still aboard the Elliott, or did you move to another ship?
No, I was a first class, I was an E6 when I left the Elliott. And the captain was gonna promote me. There were 3 of us that were second class petty officers, E5s. There was a cook, a sonar tech, and myself as a hull tech. And the captain was gonna promote one of us to E6. He had the power to do that. And I was on the list, but when we took the test, the sonarman and myself made it on the test. They were going to wait for the test results to come back. You know, you take it every 6 months, for E6 and below. And but I took, we both made it first class, and so the cook got promoted. He didn't make it, so he got promoted. And the only difference is when you pass the test, you have to, there might be in the entire Navy 200 or 300 in your rate that got advanced, both coast. So you're giving a certain date that this is when you can actually start drawing the money for it. But when you're promoted by the captain, you can draw it that day. So actually, the cook made out on the deal. He's drawing a full E6 pay, and we're still waiting to get paid, you know. But, you know.
That's just the way it goes sometimes, ain't it?
Yeah, but to make it on your own is also gratifying too. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So.
Well, before we talk about Desert Storm and everything, I'd love to hear about some of the men you might have been on any of these ships with. Did you make any close friends you wanted? Please.
I've got one here, and this would come to mind. In in 1985, I came out of Norfolk Naval Shipyard. I was working in there for Sinkland, which is aircraft carriers East Coast, right? And I worked on the Nimitz, I worked on the Lexington, I worked on just about every aircraft carrier on the East Coast. And then I got orders to a ship. And my time was up, shore duty, and I went to the USS Yellowstone. It was an AD. It was auxiliary destroyer, so it was destroyer tender, took care of surface ships. You know, they'd come alongside and we'd repair them. So my very first day on board, I goes on board. Now I'm NDT, non-destructive testing of metals. I went to that school. And so I was a welding inspector, and I shot industrial radiographs using a live source, you know, and x-ray machine for welder qualifications. So, and I was an examiner. I could examine other people to do that radiography, you know. And so I goes aboard the Yellowstone, and I had a kid come up to me and say, hey, the senior chief you're working for wants to see you ASAP. And I didn't know him personally. And so I went into his office, and he goes, hey, look, I've been tasked to write a nuclear QA manual for surface ships like Rickover did for the submarine force. And I can't do it, omdi-domdi, I'm delegating it to you. And I told him, hey, look, I just have a high school education. Go give it to the nuclear propulsion engineers on board. I mean, they're the ones that actually do the work in the reactor compartments on these nuke ships. And no, they give it to me, and I'm giving it to you. And I said, well, how long did you have to do it? He said, 6 months. Well, how long do I have to do it? 3 weeks. I told him, okay, here's the deal. I'll go home and I'll start on it. I'm computer illiterate, so I'm going to have to write it out longhand, and I'll bring it back in and give you a couple of chapters until I get it done, and I'll call you every morning to muster, and I'm not going to come 30 miles in, every morning. I got her done and I turned it in. And so I got a letter of appreciation. They all got Navy Achievement Medals, right? That's how it works. But this is Commanding Officer, USS Yellowstone AD, HTC SW, I was a surface warfare specialist, Carl L. Spencer, letter of appreciation. I take this opportunity to express my appreciation for your professional achievement, spirit, performance of your duties by serving as the Assistant Quality Assurance Division Officer and leading Chief of the Non-Destructive Test Lab in USS Yellowstone AD 41. You consistently perform your demanding duties in an exemplary and highly professional manner, displaying exceptional skill and understanding of the surface nuclear systems. You volunteered many off-duty hours planning, researching, and coordinating the development of Yellowstone's first comprehensive surface nuclear quality assurance instruction. This instruction promulgates technical, administrative policies and procedures to ensure that all material applied to surface nuclear propulsion plant systems and systems in the nuclear support facility are performed in strict compliance with technical specifications. In addition, you establish a training program to qualify nuclear quality assurance inspectors and nuclear controlled material petty officers. You just can't take a valve and put it in a nuclear system. You buy 100 valves off a company. If you're going to put them in a nuclear system, every single one of them has to be tested. If you're just going to use them for non-nuke, you can test 12 of them out of 100, you know what I mean? Randomly. And you got to issue them a MIC number, a material identification code. You know, it's highly kept professional, which is a good way to be when you're working with nuclear sources. You know,
Absolutely.
so I got her done. And finally, it was recognized as time went on, years passed, it was adopted by the Navy as the general instruction for both coasts with very few changes. It was 161 pages, computerized pages. They'd correct my spelling and then put it in the computer. And it was 13 chapters, same as the submarine QA manual. And they recognized that, and it was over 10,000 words, so they awarded me Navy Commendation Medal when I retired. You know what I mean? But at least they
recognize it at the end of the
right.
day.
Yeah, it was cool. If you'd give that to civilians, they'd charge you $1 million just to start up. You know what I mean? Just to get the pencils sharpened and the paper out, you know? But
So let's hop into 1990. I want to hear about Desert Storm and what you did during that.
Desert Storm, I went there. I was on the Horn CG-30, which is a cruiser. It was a real old ship, getting ready to decommission. Now, the primary mission of a cruiser is to stay 250 miles ahead of the battle group and to take down any kind of aircraft. So it's anti-aircraft, it's the primary mission. And they have a range of 250 miles ahead of themselves, so you're looking at 500 miles, but that's not a lot of distance. Supersonic jet can come in on those carriers or battle wagon. I was in USS Missouri's battle group. And we were the farthest most deployed ship in Desert Storm.
So it's you, the USS Missouri, and any other ships that you recall in that battle group?
I worked on the USS Missouri. I have a story on the USS Missouri.
No kidding.
It was home ported in Long Beach. I was on shore duty in Long Beach, working the NDT lab. And I was called up by their chief engineer on board, Lieutenant Commander, and he wanted our command to come over and do ultrasonic inspections of their soot blow, bottom blow, and surface blow piping on their boilers. Now, those battle wagons have 8 boilers, 2 in every fire room, 4 fire rooms on board, right? They're 600-pound plants. They're the very small, old-time boilers from 1940s when they were built. Babcock and Wilcox brand, you know. So he wanted me to come over, and soot blow, bottom blow, and surface blow is on the bottom of the boilers, and it's lagged, covered with lagging. So I goes over and I look at it, and I tell him, okay, we'll bring our machines over here, and I've got 2 or 3 inspectors, and we'll work on it 24/7, because he's getting underway, and he had to make this underway time. I told him, okay, not a problem. So he had his people, boiler tenders, go down in there and start removing the lagging where I showed them. So we could take a measurement, thickness measurement on the piping. It was Schedule 40, which they don't use Schedule 40 anymore. It's Schedule 80. It's double walled with that. So anyway, they started taking all this lagging off, and I'm down there, and it looks like a blizzard, you know, blowing all over the place. And I told him, hey, that's asbestos. Oh, no, they took all that off when they brought us back, you know, and they took all that out. And I says, no, I'm telling you, that's, as a chief, I'm looking at it. I said, you got a chief down here or what? Yeah, we have a senior chief. So this big dude comes down there, senior chief, and he goes, no, that's not. I says, yeah, senior chief, look at it. That's asbestos. And I told my guys, I told those kids down there, get out of here, let us settle down, get you some masking tape and mask over all the cuts you made, but let us settle down. Don't cut no more. I told my guys, pack up all your belongings, we're going back to the barn. I gets back there. I knew I was going to have a visit. I took a sample of that lagging. I put it in a rag and I taped it up. And we had an industrial hygienist, civilian, on the base. I took it to him. And I give it to him. I need this analyzed ASAP. They're going to be on me. And so he started working on it. And nighttime, got up the next morning. I goes in over the 1MC, Chief Spencer, lay to the captain's office. Well, I knew that. I goes up, and he was commander in rank, but he was a Mustang. He went up through the ranks as a chief, and then he went LDO, limited duty officer, and then made commander. He was 38 years in the Navy. You know, he had some time. He was. So their captain come over, chief engineer, and the chief engineer told me he was going to put me on report and for taking that sample off his ship without his permission. I told him, go ahead. If you want to sacrifice your kids in peacetime, go ahead. It was 1989, before Desert Storm. And so my captain settled down. Let's get this thing on down. About that time, you know, here comes the industrial hygienist. It was the worst asbestos you could have, you know. They just didn't, they forgot about, this is when a boiler goes to cold iron, they all that excess steam goes over and bubbles in the water off the ship, you know, on the side of the ship in the drink. And so it's how they get rid of all that when they go to cold iron, you know. And they just didn't think of getting that low in the bilges, you know what I mean, to just take it off, take it out. And that's on all 8 boilers. So they missed their underway time, and, you know, he was pretty hot, that lieutenant commander, you know, the chief engineer. Things happen, you know.
And that was on board the USS Missouri?
Huh?
That was aboard the USS Missouri?
That was on the USS Missouri, yeah.
All right. So we left off, you're in the battle group of the USS Missouri. You're on the cruiser ahead of them, though, right?
Right, yeah, I was on a cruiser.
All right. So
then,
yeah, what happened?
Well, it was pretty good. We had SM-1 and SM-2 missiles, you know, that, you know, had a 250-mile range on them, you know, so but most of the aircraft that Iraq had, they flew into Iran, you know, and parked prior to. And there was only 1 or 2 jets up there, you know, and our own jets took them out, you know. And then we did blow a ship half in 2 with a Harpoon missile. You know, we have those Harpoon missiles. They're good about, they have, it's like those Exorcist missiles that they hit the frigate Stark with, that Iraqi, before the Iraqi war. He came in on the Stark, shot 2 Exorcist missiles, those French-made missiles, and they go down on the drink about 6 feet off the drink and hit the side of the ship, blew a hole in it, killed 34 sailors. They were sleeping in the berthing area there where it hit. 2 of them hit them. And so they start finding those little fast frigates only have about 250 so spaces on board, and they had most of those on fire. So the ship, they were trying to put those fires out, and they put so much salt water inside the ship, they were starting to list the ship. So captain had them stop fighting the fire to try to get, you know, what they had, you know, to get it out. He saved the ship, but he got fired, you know, because he let that plane come in too close to him before he did it. I felt for him, you know, but.
So what ship did you hit with the Harpoon missile?
Harpoons are like the Exorcist. The difference is Exorcist carries 500 pounds of TNT in the head. Ours carries 1,000 pounds of TNT in the head. When it hit the side of the ship, it blew it in two, you know. So it blew Iraqi ship in two, put their sailors in the water, didn't kill them. It was just whoever survived, you know, and they picked up survivors, you know.
Did you pick any of the survivors up on your
Right.
ship?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you remember about that? Anything notable?
They were dramatized, to say the least, you know. And they were covered in fuel oil, and, you know, they were pretty nasty. But they kept them isolated, and they had a brig on board, you know. But they had them mainly in sick bay, you know. They have like 30, 40 hospital beds, you know, racks, you know, that fold down. Yep.
Did you end up taking them back to Iraq?
It didn't, well, the war didn't last that long.
Right.
So the command master chief and he took me and a few other chiefs, and we rode other ships that were going to come back to the station, go through their firefighting drills. And we rode to Niagara Falls, USS Niagara Falls. It was an oiler and a supply ship. And we rode Cape Cod was a tender. And we actually had them come down, go to general quarters, come down and show us while we observed them putting out a fire, you know, and just give them pointers and told him exactly what the scene leader had to do and how he had to control. And that I was scene leader on a ship on a tender, and I had a warrant officer observing me one time. We were going through drills because we were getting ready. It was in the middle of the Indian Ocean. And we're getting ready to, when we get back to the States, to go through the same rough trade. And he was watching me. He was a CW04. And he's standing there with the command master chief. And so I had 20 kids on the hoses. And they went down in the main space in full gear. They had firefighting ensembles, hood, OBAs, lit off, everything. In the space they went. I was against doing that because it was 120 degrees outside. And it's also 140 degrees down in the main. You have 1,200-pound plants down there, and you have two boilers lit off, hot. I told our warrant officer, don't do it. But he insisted. Okay, so my kids went down in there, and I'm scene leader at the top. And all of a sudden, an observer had never come up the ladder, always stayed down in the hole through the whole drill. Came up, a female. There was 500 females on board, 1,000 dudes. She came up, first-class petty officer. She told me, Chief, they're getting ready to collapse. They can't take the heat. They're gonna go down on you. I told her, secure the drill. I secured the drill. We was at general quarters. Captain was on the bridge. All hands man your battle station. I secured the drill at the scene. That warrant officer jumped into my face and started going off that he wanted one of them to pass out so he could know how much they could take. I went off on him on that. And the command master chief had to pull me back to keep from smacking him. And so here come the captain, come down off the bridge. I told two kids to go up to the mess decks, get a ladle and a big old tub of water. But get water, don't get bug juice, tea, nothing like that. Get water, bring it out the third deck fantail. And I told these kids to come up the ladder, take your OBAs off, start stripping down, go all the way out to the fantail. Had cups and water and everything for them out there. Well, here come the captain down there, because we had to break zebra to do that. Captain comes down there and he says, Chief Spencer, did you secure the drill? Yes, Captain, I did. He goes, good job, good job. And I told him, you ought to go out to the third deck fantail and check on your people. You know, some of them are pretty wobbly, and which he did. You know, now he was a full bird. Now he was a captain. He was same as a colonel, you know, rank. But he was also a Mustang where he had come up to the enlisted ranks and went all the way to full bird. So he was pretty knowledgeable dude, you know. And that warrant officer, yeah, but I tell you what, after that, I couldn't do no wrong. When I told those kids to do something, they did it. You know what I mean? They knew that I would protect them and take care of them and not sacrifice them like that, you know, in a drill, you know.
Now, did you do a full 30 years in the Navy?
I did 24.
24.
I did 4 years. I did one enlistment, 17, and went to 21 years old and got out. I come back to Kansas City, but I lived in Kansas City and I worked for the gas service company for about 6 or 7 years.
Gotcha.
And then I went back on active duty in 75 after Vietnam. And in 75, all of our troops were out. In 73, the war had stopped, you know, and the combat troops were out, you know. So 75, I went back on active duty, and I retired out in 95. I stayed 20, and then they give me 24.
With
So,
your prior. That's
right.
awesome. And what have you been up to since you got out of the Navy?
Let's see. When I was 1 month shy of 49. I retired out of Alaska in the Aleutian Islands. Right. I was on an unaccompanied tour for 1 year. Shut the base down. It was on the BRAC list to close, base realignment and closure list, and I shut it down. I work for the Seabees, and they give me Seabee troops, and I went over there, and they had bunkers and all that kind of stuff. I always thought the Russians were going to come over at ADAC, so we had all these decon stations and fully geared for 75 combat troops each. Had 10 or 12 of them, and they would go in there and inventory all the gear and everything, and then we would barge it back to Port Huenemi's DRMOs to be distributed around the world. Meals ready to eat by the thousands, you know.
Yeah, just in case the Russians ever.
I've been eating on those since I got out. No. No, I sent them all back, everything back, and we shut her down. And then I had one other. I was command duty officer at Naval Amphib Base Coronado, California. When the captain went home, I was on duty, and I would make decisions in his stead, you know, simple stuff. So it's midnight, and I did a round around the base. Everything was secured. I went back to the barrack, and I get this call to come down to the quarterdeck. Well, the SEALs were across the street. Their base was across the street, right? SEAL teams 1, 3, and 5. The odd number on the West Coast, even numbers on the East Coast, right? And there's only 6 teams, 3 on each coast. So 1, 3, and 5 was there, and they were having a party, and they were getting all boozed up, but they were in there, and what they have done over time is the city of Coronado allowed big old hotels to high-rises to come right up to the SEAL team property. Well, you had some guy up there was calling the quarterdeck to talk to me about going over there and shutting them down because they were too noisy and raising hell, right? But I mean, these guys would deploy for months, you know, and come back so they'd have a party. Who cares, you know? So, but this guy, he called up there and he goes, "Are you Chief Spencer?" And I told him, "Yes, sir." He goes, "Well, I'm up here on the 30th floor, and I own the whole floor, and I want you to go down and tell them SEALs, knock it off." And I told him, "Okay, I'll go over there." I went over there, I talked to a lieutenant, and I told him, it's like 1 o'clock in the morning now, and I says, "Hey, you're getting complaints, you're gonna have to knock it off." And he goes, "I'll take care of it, and we will knock it off. We're getting ready to secure, you know." And so I went back, and the guy called up, "Well, I thought you said you were gonna," I said, "Sir, I went over there." I said, "Who is this anyway?" And he goes, "My name is Arvel Redenbacher." You know, the popcorn dude? But he talked like this. "My name is Arvel I thought, you almost got my ass kicked. You know what I mean? You almost got my ass popped. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's funny.
And, but, you know, it's just life in a big city, you know?
Well, I just have a couple other questions to wrap us up today. What do you want people to remember about Desert Storm or the Iran hostage crisis based on your experience having been there?
I thought the military handled it the best that they possibly could. You know, of course, Desert Storm was there, all the countries united and were behind us, and see what happens. That's why you can't bust NATO. You can't bust NATO. I don't care if they're not paying their share. If a war broke out, it cost us trillions. So what's the difference if we're paying a little bit more? It doesn't matter. You can't bust NATO. I thought about it the other day. I was thinking, you know, all the countries that was behind us. There was over 100 countries backing us in Desert Storm. If a world conflict broke out now, if you didn't have that backing and tried to go it with just a few countries, you know, then it would actually spill into this country. You know, people that's never thought of having a war or anything like that, they would probably see it on the street, you know.
Now, is there any song, music, that if you heard it today would take you back to your days in the Navy?
Barnacle Bill the Sailor? No, no, I love the Navy. You know, I love the Navy. I had one bad executive officer, that's second in command, and he had 20 officers in the wardroom resign their commission on him. He was that bad. He was a nuke officer on a non-nuke ship, so he nuked everything, you know. And it was terrible, but, you know, I did what he told me to do, you know.
Did you ever do those King Neptune ceremonies crossing the equator?
Yes, I'm a shellback.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and what happened, the ship went to Auckland, New Zealand, right? Now, this was the Elliott. It went to Auckland, New Zealand, and crossed the equator. But before it crossed the equator, I was sent off on a plane on emergency leave, and I went back home. Went back to Lexington, and then I was there for 10 days, and then I flew back, and the ship was already in Auckland, and I caught up with the ship in Auckland. Auckland has the same weather as San Francisco, but the difference on the Antarctic is when it's summertime here in August and July, it's winter time there. So you had to wear a pea coat, you know what I mean, out in town. So when we come back and cross the equator, you had 300 people that were already shellbacks, initiating about 5 of us. So they beat the living crap out of it. Everybody has to get their hit in, with the shillelagh, and all this good stuff. So we actually took a ass kicking, I was black and blue from on my hips, up my back.
I can't even imagine. Lastly, do you have any final thoughts or words of advice for anybody who's watching this in the future?
Pardon me?
Do you have any final thoughts or words of advice to anybody who's watching this?
I would think heavy about joining the Navy. If you want to learn a trade, like I don't have any college, but I learned quite a bit welding and shoot, industrial radiographs and all kinds of stuff, and it pays good money on the outside, steady money, You always be in work. So for these young people, and the Navy's, it's just like a regular job, come and go. But do as you're told, and if you question anything and you have any dispute at all, tell them you want that order in writing, and 99 times out of 100 they won't put it in writing because they know it's pretty dumb. So they'll just say forget it. You know what I mean?
Well, Carl, thank you so much for taking the time this afternoon to come by and share your stories with me. It's an honor and a pleasure, but most importantly, thank you so much for your service. Greatly appreciate you.
Thank you.